Hi guys, welcome to Utkalp Digital Classes. I'm Richa and I'm your mentor for the CSIR UGC NET Life Sciences course. Today I bring to you another lecture from the Cell Biology series, that is the Unit 2 of your CSIR NET syllabus. So today we are going to discuss the rough endoplasmic reticulum. I'm going to deal with the structure of the rough endoplasmic reticulum, its functions, and a few important topics. So after this lecture, I'm going to deal with the smooth endoplasmic reticulum in the next lecture. So once I finish with the unit 2, I'm going to deal with all the important questions and the important topics which are expected to be a part of the CSIR NET examination. So make sure after you finish all the lectures, you should also go through that lecture wherein I'm going to discuss the questions and the topics. That is going to be very important for your preparation. Let's begin with the endoplasmic reticulum. Today in this video, we are basically going to deal with the rough endoplasmic reticulum, its structure, functions, and parts of vesicular transport. What is the endomembrane system? The endomembrane system is a network of membranes within the cell interconnected by vesicular transport. All these organelles, such as the outer nuclear envelope, ER, Golgi, lysosomes, endosomes, plasma membrane, all these constitute the endomembrane system. So suppose the ER wants to send a cargo to Golgi, or Golgi wants to send a cargo to lysosome. How is this accomplished in the cell? This is done through vesicles. Say this is ER, and there is a protein being synthesized in ER which has to travel to the Golgi network. The protein will first be packaged into a vesicle. The vesicle will then bud off from the surface of the ER. It will travel through the cytoplasm into the Golgi, where the vesicle will fuse with the Golgi membrane and deliver the contents into the Golgi sacs. So all these organelles, which are connected to each other through vesicular transport, constitute the endomembrane system. How does the endomembrane system work? As I just discussed, transport vesicle buds from the smooth or rough endoplasmic reticulum. The vesicle fuses with the Golgi apparatus. It dumps its contents inside the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi then modifies the molecule and moves it through its successive chambers. So, can you see in the figure that the cargo buds off from the surface of the ER in a vesicle. This vesicle travels through the cytoplasm and then fuses with the Golgi membrane. The cargo then travels through the various sacs of the Golgi apparatus. The cargo is modified within the Golgi. The modified cargo again gets packaged into the vesicles, and this vesicle then fuses with the plasma membrane to deliver the contents outside the cell. Similarly, these vesicles can also go and fuse with other organelles in the cell. Coming to the structure of RER, RER is composed of two structural elements, namely the tubules and the cisternae. Now, what are the cisternae? Cisternae are interconnected parallel flat sheets. Can you see here in the figure? These parallel flat sheets, this is one sheet, this is the next sheet, the third sheet and the fourth sheet. These parallel sheets together constitute the cisternae. And the cisternae are always attached to ribosomes on their cytoplasmic side. So this is the basic structural difference between the cisternae and the tubules, that the cisternae are always connected with, always attached with ribosomes on its surface. However, the tubules are elongated tube-like structures. Here you can see some tubules. This tubule is attached to ribosomes, whereas this tubule is not attached to ribosomes. So the tubules may or may not have ribosomes on their surface. The tubules have less luminal space as compared to the cisternae. We just discussed the structure of ER, that it is associated with ribosomes on the cytoplasmic side. Therefore, the name rough. We have cisternae, we have tubules. We also have a third very important structural element of the RER, which is the transitional elements. Now, what is the transitional element? So here I am making a few cisternae. At the edges of the cisternae, so here the cisternae is attached to ribosomes. But the edges of the cisternae are tube-like, which do not attach to ribosomes. So these edges are termed as transitional elements. They are present towards the edges of the cisternae. They are involved in the formation of the transitional vesicles, and they are never associated with ribosomes. Can you tell me one importance of not being associated with ribosomes? So if the transitional elements are associated with ribosomes, the vesicle which buds off from the transitional element is also going to have the ribosomes. Some of the important functions of RER are the synthesis of proteins, secretory proteins of the cell, as well as the integral membrane proteins of the ER are synthesized in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Modification of the synthesized proteins is also a function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Modifications like glycosylation and folding of the proteins occurs in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. As already discussed, formation of transitional vesicles, recognition and removal of misfolded proteins. Students, this is a very important function of RER, because if misfolded proteins are present in the cell, they are going to aggregate together and they are going to cause the folded proteins to also misfold, leading to a variety of diseases. Assembly of multimeric proteins and quality control of protein synthesis, protein modification and protein assembly. Coming to protein synthesis, within a cell, protein can be synthesized at two different locations. What are these locations? One is the ribosomes attached to the RER, and the other is on the free ribosome suspended in the cytoplasm. Now, what all proteins will be synthesized on the ribosomes attached to RER, and what all proteins will be synthesized on the free ribosomes? So all the proteins within a cell which have to be targeted to the following organelles, like the nucleus, the peroxisomes, the mitochondria, chloroplast. All these proteins are synthesized on free ribosomes. You will have to memorize this. So all the cytosolic proteins, the proteins which have to remain in the cytosol, all the peripheral proteins of the inner surface of the plasma membrane, and all the proteins of the nucleus, peroxisomes, mitochondria and chloroplast are synthesized on the free ribosomes. Now, what all proteins are synthesized on the ribosomes attached to the RER? The secretory proteins required by vacuoles, Golgi bodies, plasma membrane, endosomes, lysosomes and ER. That is, the proteins destined to reside within the endomembrane system are synthesized on ribosomes attached to RER. So all the secretory proteins of these organelles as well as the integral membrane proteins of the RER are synthesized on the ribosomes attached to the RER. Here again we discuss the same thing. Free ribosomes in the cytosol are responsible for the protein production, the proteins which are required for nucleus, mitochondria, chloroplast and peroxisomes. Mind you, peroxisomes are not part of the endomembrane system. Now, membrane-bound ribosomes, that is the ribosomes present on the RER, are responsible for the production of proteins which are required by plasma membrane, secretory vesicles, endosomes, lysosomes, Golgi, etc. All these are synthesized on the membrane-bound ribosomes. Let's start with the first function of the RER, which is protein synthesis. So protein synthesis always, mind you, always begins on free ribosomes suspended in the cytosol. So these are the free ribosomes present in the cytosol. All the protein synthesis, be it proteins of the RER, proteins of the endomembrane system, or cytosolic proteins, the synthesis of all the proteins starts on the free ribosomes. So the proteins being synthesized on free ribosomes may get transported to ER simultaneous to their translation. So while the translation is being carried out on the ribosomes, simultaneous to this translation, when the ribosome and the peptide complex go and attach to the ER membrane, that process is called as co-translational translocation. Or the protein ribosome complex may get translocated to the ER after the protein has been fully translated on free ribosomes. So this process is called as post-translational translocation. So these are the two processes of ribosome peptide complex being transported to the ER. One is co-translational translocation and one is post-translational translocation. Now, how does the ribosome know that it has to attach to the RER membrane? What are the signals that are given to the ribosome to make it aware that it has to go and attach to the RER membrane? Let's study these. Gunter Blobel and David Sabatini in 1979 gave the signal hypothesis, for which they were awarded a Nobel Prize in 1999. So according to this hypothesis, the nascent proteins or the nascent polypeptides being synthesized on the ribosomes have a small sequence called the signal sequence or the signal peptide towards the amino terminus, that is, towards their positively charged end, which tells us that the entire complex has to translocate to the RER. So only those nascent proteins which exhibit a small sequence called the signal sequence or the signal peptide towards the amino terminus are translocated to RER along with the ribosome. There is a complete process and a lot of components involved in this process, which we are going to study a bit later. First, we are going to discuss the components, the functional regions of the signal peptide. So the signal peptide has three functional regions. One is the N-terminal region. Don't get confused between the N-terminal signal peptide and N-terminal region of the signal peptide. So if I say this is the signal peptide, it has three regions: an N-terminal region, a middle region, and a C-terminal region. Say this is the polypeptide. Towards the N-terminal end of the polypeptide, you have a signal sequence, and towards the N-terminal end of the signal sequence, you have the N-terminal region, which is variable in length, can be somewhere around 6 to 15 amino acids, and they are rich in positively charged residues. There is the middle region, which is again variable in length. It has around 6 to 10 amino acids, and the middle region is rich in hydrophobic amino acids. Then you have the C-terminal region, which is the most important. It is not too variable. The length of the C-terminal region is fixed. It has 5 to 7 amino acids, and the -1 and -3 residues are essentially uncharged. They are neutral residues, and these residues, the -1 and -3 residues, are very important as they provide a cleavage site for the cleavage of the signal peptide by signal peptidases. So once the ribosome and the peptide complex sits on the RER membrane, so this is the protein being inserted inside the RER. Once the entire protein is inside the RER, the N-terminal signal peptide is going to get cleaved off at the -1 and -3 position by signal peptidases already present in the RER lumen. So this is the signal sequence, the N-terminal region, which is positively charged. it has 6 to 15 amino acids. The H region or the hydrophobic region, which is also known as the middle region, it has 6 to 10 amino acids. And then there is the C-terminal region where -1 and -3 residues are essentially important because they provide a cleavage site for signal peptidases. Once the signal peptide is cleaved, you get a mature protein. So the signal sequence is attached to the proteins being synthesized on free ribosomes, and this signal sequence is recognized by something called as a signal recognition particle. Now a signal recognition particle is a cytoplasmic ribonucleoprotein complex. It's a cytoplasmic ribonucleoprotein complex. What does that mean? It means that it is present in the cytoplasm and the entire complex is made up of ribonucleoprotein. It has RNA and it has proteins. The SRP, that is the signal recognition particle, is a GTP binding protein. So it binds GTP and it binds to both the signal sequence on the nascent polypeptide and the ribosome. So suppose this is your SRP. Don't mind my handwriting. This is the SRP. It is bound to a GTP molecule, and further it is bound to both the polypeptide as well as the ribosome. So this is the ribosome and this is the polypeptide. Okay. Now the SRP ribosome complex contacts the SRP receptor present on the RER membrane. So what happens is, first you only have the ribosome and the polypeptide. Then a cytoplasmic ribonucleoprotein complex, which is the signal recognition particle or the SRP, comes and binds to the ribosome polypeptide complex. Now this entire complex, that is the ribosome, polypeptide and SRP, goes and binds to the signal recognition particle receptor, that is the SRP receptor, which is present on the RER membrane. Now both SRP and SRP receptor are GTP binding proteins. That means this is the RER receptor on the, this is the SRP receptor on the RER membrane, right? Similar to SRP, which was bound by GTP, here also SRP receptor is also a GTP binding protein. So say this is a molecule of GTP. Only when the SRP receptor is bound to GTP and the SRP is bound to GTP can the SRP and SRP receptor interact. So in their GDP bound states, both of them cannot interact with each other. So it's essentially important that the SRP as well as the SRP receptor are bound to GTP when they interact. So both SRP and SRP receptor are GTP binding proteins that interact with each other in GTP bound states. Attachment of the SRP ribosome complex to the SRP receptor is mediated by GTP hydrolysis. What this point says is, as soon as this SRP ribosome polypeptide complex comes and binds with GTP bound SRP receptor, both the GTPs get hydrolyzed. So both the GTPs are converted into GDP. As soon as the GTP converts to GDP, the attachment of the SRP ribosome complex to the SRP receptor occurs. Now, as soon as the GTP is hydrolyzed, there is a release of the SRP for another set of reaction. Let's understand this from the diagram. You have a ribosome polypeptide complex which is bound to an SRP. Now, SRP in turn is bound to GTP. When this entire complex comes near the RER membrane, this entire complex binds to an SRP receptor already present on the RER membrane, which is also bound to GTP. So the SRP as well as the SRP receptor both are bound to GTP. When both are bound to GTP, both interact. This brings the ribosome polypeptide complex closer to the ER membrane. As soon as the ribosome polypeptide complex comes and binds to the ER membrane, the GTP are hydrolyzed. So there is a release of 2 GDP molecules. As soon as the 2 GDP molecules are released, SRP is released for another set of reaction into the cytoplasm and the SRP receptor is rendered free. Now, how does this complex, how does the polypeptide from the ribosome enter the ER? Now let's study this process. How is the signal sequence bound polypeptide transported into the RER lumen? So there is a special translocator, that is a channel protein present within the RER membrane, which is called the translocon. So there's a special channel protein in the RER membrane which is called the translocon, and this translocon is responsible for the polypeptide to get transported into the RER lumen. So this translocon is tightly regulated and gated towards the luminal side. So suppose this is the channel and this is the RER membrane. This channel is gated towards the luminal side. So this gate is closed or regulated. So how does the signal sequence bound polypeptide enter this channel? The binding of the signal peptide to the interior of the translocon displaces the plug from the channel. So this plug is displaced as soon as the signal peptide binds to the interior of the channel. So the signal peptide binding with the interior of the channel displaces this plug. So this plug is removed and the nascent polypeptide enters the ER lumen. I hope all of you are understanding and all of you have understood till this point. So after the nascent polypeptide passes into the ER lumen, the signal peptide is cleaved by the signal peptidases, as I already told you. And these signal peptidases are already present in the ER lumen. Now, this path is followed by the secretory proteins of endomembrane system. But what about the proteins which have to remain in the ER membrane? So suppose a protein comes which has to remain in the ER membrane. That protein cannot pass down into the ER lumen. Then it will never get incorporated into the ER membrane. Then how does the integral membrane proteins of the ER membrane get incorporated into the membrane? So this happens through the translocon only, but the integral membrane proteins of the ER contain an N-terminal transmembrane stop transfer sequence. I know it's a little confusing, but you guys have to understand this really well. This is very important. So the proteins which are to be incorporated into the RER membrane will never pass down into the lumen of the RER. They will bind with the translocon, but they have a sequence which is called the stop transfer sequence that binds to and blocks the translocon. So it binds to the translocon and blocks the translocon further. The plug is never removed. So these integral membrane proteins exit the translocon laterally. So from the lateral sides, these proteins are going to exit the translocon and they are going to remain in the ER membrane. Next, we talk about a very important function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum, that is protein folding. Now, why is folding important? Why can't just all the proteins in the cell be in a random manner, in a haphazard shape? Folding is extremely important because every protein is composed of two types of residues. There are hydrophobic residues and there are hydrophilic residues. Obviously, neutral residues are also there, but these hydrophobic residues are the ones which are a menace to the cell. So what happens is, these hydrophobic residues, if they are exposed, if they are present towards the exterior of the protein, as in they are present next to the aqueous environment in which the protein is suspended, these hydrophobic residues start aggregating. They start attracting each other and they start aggregating. Let's consider this diagram here. This is an unfolded protein. This red part is a hydrophobic moiety and this blue part is a hydrophilic moiety. So when the hydrophobic moiety is towards the exterior of the protein, it tends to attract other hydrophobic moieties towards each other. So all the hydrophobic residues, they tend to attract one another and then they tend to aggregate. So this is aggregation, where two or more than two hydrophobic residues come and attract each other and they aggregate to form clumps. So what will these aggregates do? Why are they problematic to the cell? These aggregates will act as catalysts, which in turn will induce unfolding of other properly folded proteins. So if I have one hydrophobic residue here, one hydrophobic residue here, and I have water all over, so these hydrophobic residues are going to repel this water, but they are going to attract each other. When they attract each other, in order to push all the water which is present in between them, they will come together and aggregate. They will form a structure like this, where they come together and aggregate. These aggregates are problematic to the cell because these aggregates are going to further attract more hydrophobic residues and they are going to form bigger clusters in the cell, bigger aggregated protein clusters. Another problem which is posed by unfolded proteins is that if these unfolded proteins are secreted out of the ER, they may present novel antigenic responses. So if this protein, it's not a native protein, it is a native protein to the cell, but the shape in which it is suspended is not native to the cell. So the cell will recognize this complex as a foreign complex, as a pathogen, or as an antigen, a foreign antigen, and the cell will activate an immune response. So these unfolded proteins are problematic in the cell, and that is why we need proper protein folding. There are several molecular chaperones present in the ER lumen that assist in protein folding. Now, what are these chaperones? These chaperones are also proteins or enzymes that assist in protein folding. Suppose I have an unfolded protein, what in the ER lumen, what this chaperone is going to do is this chaperone is going to come. It is going to cover the entire surface of the protein. It is going to bind to the unfolded protein. It is going to stabilize the unfolded protein so that the unfolded protein does not interact with any other protein in the cell. Also, this chaperone assists the embedding of the hydrophobic residues of this protein in the interior of the protein. So, chaperones interact with and shield the hydrophobic regions of the polypeptide from the aqueous surroundings and assist in proper folding. These chaperones require ATP for their function. So ATP is absolutely necessary, and these chaperones are ATP binding proteins. Several secretory and surface proteins require the formation of disulfide bonds for stability. So there are several proteins in the cell. Suppose this is a protein, this is in its unfolded state, and in the folded state it has to form disulfide bonds. So this is its folded state, wherein there is a disulfide bond between this residue and this residue. Disulfide bonds can form between cysteine-cysteine residues. Right, so there are some proteins in the cell which require the formation of these disulfide bonds for their stability. This is done by specialized chaperones called protein disulfide isomerases, and these chaperones are also found in the ER lumen. So the ER lumen is actually oxidizing in nature. Okay, so ER lumen is oxidizing, therefore it oxidizes the cysteine residues, the SH, the sulfur hydryl groups present in the cysteine molecules are oxidized to form S residues, and the other cysteine again, it also has a sulfur hydryl residue, and this sulfur hydryl residue is also oxidized. The hydrogen is removed, and once the hydrogen is removed, you get this form. One cysteine with one sulfur and the other cysteine with the other sulfur, and these two sulfurs bond together to form a disulfide linkage, and this is possible only in an oxidizing environment, because an oxidizing environment is going to convert the sulfahydryl group to sulfur group, the sulfide group. Another category of chaperones called calnexin interact with glucose residues in glycoproteins and further assist in protein folding. So there are a lot of chaperones, different categories of chaperones for different molecules. There are calnexins for glucose residues in glycoproteins, which bind to glucose, and when they bind to glucose, they lead to the proper folding of these glycoproteins. Then there are protein disulfide isomerases, which form disulfide bonds in the proteins and render them the stability, the required stability. Then you have proteins like BIP, binding proteins, HSP, that is heat shock proteins, which assist other proteins in their folding process. Next function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum is glycosylation. So protein glycosylation means the attachment of protein with carbohydrate moieties. There may be one or two or more than two carbohydrate moieties being attached to a protein, and this process where a carbohydrate or a sugar is attached to a protein is called as glycosylation. So there are two types of glycosylations present in the cell. There is N-linked glycosylation and there is O-linked glycosylation. So N-linked glycosylation takes place in ER, the rough ER, and the O-linked glycosylation takes place in Golgi. N-linked glycosylation occurs when an oligosaccharide chain is linked to the nitrogen of an asparagine residue. You know that asparagine has an NH2 group, and to the nitrogen of this group, when an oligosaccharide is linked, it is called N-linked glycosylation, and such glycosylation occurs in the RER. On the other hand, the O-linked glycosylation, which takes place in Golgi, an oligosaccharide chain is linked to the oxygen of serine or threonine. Serine and threonine both have an oxygen group. So to this oxygen, when an oligosaccharide is linked, it is called as O-linked glycosylation. Let's study the N-linked glycosylation. In N-linked glycosylation, the asparagine, which is used for this N-linked glycosylation, should be present as a short tripeptide sequence of asparagine X serine. So suppose you have a protein in which you have an asparagine here. I'll write A here for asparagine. Then you have X, where X denotes any residue other than proline, and then you have a serine next to it. If you have this tripeptide sequence in any protein, only that asparagine is going to get N-glycosylated. So the nitrogen of only that asparagine is going to be attached to oligosaccharides. Now let's look at the steps in N-linked glycosylation. So the first step involves the attachment of two NAG molecules, that is 2 N-acetyl glucosamine molecules and 5 mannose molecules. So these 7 sugars, that is 2 NAG residues and 5 mannose residues, are transferred one at a time to a dolicol pyrophosphate molecule, which is already present on the ER membrane towards the cytoplasmic side. So this dolicol pyrophosphate molecule is an isoprene unit. I mean, it is composed of isoprene molecules. This dolicol pyrophosphate molecule is already present towards the cytoplasmic side of the ER. To this dolicol pyrophosphate, there comes one NAG, and NAG is attached to UTP when it comes and attaches to the dolicol pyrophosphate molecule. As soon as the NAG molecule attaches to the dolicol pyrophosphate, the UTP is hydrolyzed to UDP. Then another NAG molecule comes and attaches to this first NAG molecule. Then one mannose molecule comes along with as mannose GTP. When the mannose residue is attached, again GTP is hydrolyzed to GDP. Then another GTP mannose, another GTP mannose, and in this manner 2 NAGs and 5 mannose molecules are attached towards the cytoplasmic side. And the enzyme which is responsible for the attachment of all these 7 residues is called as glycosyl transferase. So this is a family of enzymes. There are a lot of glycosyl transferases present in the cell. So these glycosyl transferases are responsible for the addition of sugars to this dolicol pyrophosphate molecule. Now the next step involves flipping of the dolicol pyrophosphate along with the oligosaccharides to the luminal side. So what happens is this dolicol pyrophosphate molecule, which was attached to all these sugars in the first step, now flips to the luminal side. That means now all these sugars are attached towards the luminal side. Now in this step, after these 7 sugars were attached, another 7 sugars come and bind to these already bound 7 sugars. These are 4 mannose residues. Again, mannose comes as GTP mannose, and as soon as the mannose is attached to the oligosaccharide chain, GTP is hydrolyzed to GDP. 4 mannose and then 3 glucose molecules are attached to the dolicol linked oligosaccharide chain towards the luminal side. Now, this transfer is also carried out by glycosyl transferases. Now, the next step involves the transfer of this complete oligosaccharide to aspargine residue. Remember, we talked about the NH2 of the aspargine being linked to the oligosaccharide chain in N-linked glycosylation. So this NH2 will now be linked to this already formed oligosaccharide chain by enzymes called oligosaccharyl protein transferases. So proteins present in the ER lumen, and towards the luminal side, this dolicol along with its oligosaccharide chain is present. Now the oligosaccharide chain is going to be cleaved off from the dolicol molecule, and this chain is going to go to the protein molecule. Where it is going to bind to the protein molecule? On the NH2 of the aspargine. And which aspargine? That aspargine which exists as an aspargine X serine sequence. And which enzyme carries out this transfer, the transfer of the oligosaccharide chain to the aspargine residue? The enzyme is oligosaccharyl protein transferases. And the next step, which is the last step of the N-linked glycosylation, it involves the free dolicol pyrophosphate flipping towards the cytoplasmic side. So remember the first step where the dolicol pyrophosphate molecule was present on the cytoplasmic side of the RER membrane for N-linked glycosylation. In the last step also, this dolicol pyrophosphate molecule, from where the oligosaccharide chain has been cleaved, this dolicol pyrophosphate molecule is again going to flip to the cytoplasmic side, and it is going to be ready for another round of glycosylation. So this completes our N-linked glycosylation. And with this N-linked glycosylation, the functions of RER get completed. So this is a quick recap of the functions of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. We have covered protein synthesis, we have covered protein modification, wherein we discussed about N-linked glycosylation. We discussed protein folding with the help of chaperone proteins. We discussed the formation of disulfide bonds for protein stability by protein disulfide isomerases. And this part, that is the transport of proteins, this I haven't touched upon. I am going to cover this topic in the next few lectures, wherein I am going to deal with the intracellular trafficking mechanisms, vesicular transport, types of vesicles, and so on. Stay tuned for my next lecture. In the next lecture, I am going to deal with smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And once my unit 2 is complete, the last lecture is going to be on important questions and the important topics which are expected to be a part of the CSIR UGC NET Life Sciences examination. Please subscribe to Utkalp Digital Classes for latest content on CSIR UGC NET Life Sciences exam, and stay tuned for my next lecture. Thank you.